sure you plug in and let someone check for it. I'll get a
Yeah, to go like the apple barn or to one of the Christmas tree farms here.
Yeah, I should go here.
Sadia's, that's where we go. I love it. They have a bonfire. They sell wooden reindeer and snow people. It's so exciting.
And where we are streaming.
Okay,
So-
well,
oh,
let
sorry.
everybody.
Just FYI.
That's what my doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, you got it. You know it.
My daughter-in-law is a
Sure.
You
shopkeeper.
drive it? Yeah.
Look at that. Look at him. That is so super cool. That's great.
It's really cute.
I'm really feeling very old.
Start.
Yeah.
Okay.
David, ready?
Am I holding you up?
No.
Sorry, I'm just bragging about this.
I was just.
We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Board of Education on at 7:30 p.m. on December 14th, 2021. Members in attendance: Jenny Cheetah, Devin Weigel, Jeff Parker, and John Stinson. I believe Randy Hicks will be here just a little bit later, and I know that Jen with Jesus plans to connect via Zoom. So we'll keep an eye out for them as well. Before we jump into the agenda, I'd ask that we all stand for a moment to note a very sad day. The silence to recognize the tragedy of Sandy Hook. Thank you, everyone. We'll start our agenda tonight with the election of officers. So we will, when I was elected to the chair position, we did it in an off-cycle way. So we decided as a board that it made more sense to align with the school year and to align with the sort of budget process, make sure that we have continuity sort of throughout the budget process. And so the state statutes ask that these elections happen in the December following the municipal election, which is now. So the intent is we obviously will follow the state statutes as required by law, do the elections, and then that we have another election in the June, July timeframe. I think what is recommended by our council is that we amend our bylaws to just make that an official thing. So over the course of the next few months, the intent would be that we, sort of do a first reading, do a second reading, sort of figure out the right language of how we want to do that. But we are required to go through the process. What we, the way that one of these sort of officer elections works is you have a nomination period, and then sort of people are able to nominate whoever they like. Any member can nominate anyone, any member of the board. After nominations are closed, you can vote. You actually don't vote against anyone. You can't say yes or no. You simply write down the name for the positions being considered. And I think that is it. Okay. So I would move that we continue with the existing leadership slate and nominate myself, John Stinson, for the role of board chair, and Jeff Parker for the role of secretary. Motions to nominate do require a second. Thank you, Devin. Are there any additional nominations? Hearing none, we are now required to cast our votes. We're actually required to do them in writing. So do you have cards? You have Post-it notes or cards?
I was just thinking about that.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And oh, I see Jen DeJesus joined us. I believe she joined at 7:32 p.m.
Yeah.
I support it, John.
All right, thank you, Jen.
Let's just write the office and then.
I think that's right, Jenny.
You have to write your name as well.
Yes, okay, good.
Or president instead of chair.
We could amend our bylaws to also have a president if we wanted to.
So acceptable.
I think so. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
they were all stuck together.
And who's joining us online?
James Jesus is online. I think she can write it down on a piece of paper there too and hold it up to the screen. once it does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Jen, do you mind doing that?
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I was on mute.
We can hear you just fine.
Yes, I support the motion.
Okay. I think it does say it's supposed to happen in writing. I know when we elected Jeff to secretary, we also wrote it down and hold it up to the
I'll
camera.
put it in the paper.
If you would-
One
sorry,
second.
thank you, Jen. Yeah,
We have quorum.
We do have quorum
We
here.
actually, we actually don't need. It would be nice.
Include.
right.
Can you see my paper?
Yeah, I think it has to have, thank you. I think it has to have the name of the position, name of the person, and then your name on it. Sorry. Next time we'll actually print the,
Can we show her what a.
Ballots, yeah. I think we can.
So it would just be. Yeah.
I don't know whether that's gonna.
Yeah, it is. So it'll be like that.
There you go.
Yep.
Oh, she got it.
Oh, she got it.
Sorry, let me find my camera here. I can't see myself. Hold on, here we go. Sorry, guys.
Yep,
I got it.
that's perfect. Thank you. Sorry for the clumsiness.
Sorry for my newness and not knowing.
I actually didn't see it, so.
Jen, can you just hold it up one more time so that Dr. can see it? Thank you.
Okay, great.
That's good, thank you.
All right, and we'll keep these for the record. Okay. So for the position of chairperson, we have John Stinson receiving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes. Is it?
Three, right.
Correct, 5 votes.
4 and 1 online.
Yep. And for the position of secretary, we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 5 votes.
I believe the motion passes, and I believe we are now in good shape for leadership positions. All right. That moves us to the consent agenda. We have the minutes for the November 9th, 2021 Easton Board of Education regular meeting. These minutes were posted for review on Friday, December 10th, and then also distributed earlier today to the board. At this time, the chair states any and all corrections. Yes.
I have one. Page 2, middle of the page. Amity, morning glory, got a letter from Maureen Hanley. And item 1 believes there is a double standard applied to conservative, not consecutive. It should be conservative.
Very good.
That was the only.
Any additional corrections?
I want to take one.
Yes, Tim.
I think Dana Benson's comment was that the behavior is offensive, not defensive.
Did anyone else do that?
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. We could try going back to the video. And I think we could table that as sort of pending.
Yeah, I'll make a note.
Okay.
And then I'll check the video.
I think the audio from our new setup is going to be significantly better. So you may find that audio doesn't get the job done. So it doesn't different. Any additional corrections? I think we'll need to hold these over until after that review, and so we'll bring these to our next. We're not going to pass those today.
Okay.
All right. Takes us to our next agenda item, which is public comment. Please state your full name, street, and town. Please keep in mind that comments should be limited to 3 minutes, focused on Easton's educational interests, not target individual district personnel, and be expressed in a civil manner. Is there any public comment at this point? Hearing none, we'll move to board member comment. Any comments from the board? Jen? Please.
None for me, Joan.
I just wanted to thank you for acknowledging the anniversary of Sandy Hook today. And just for all of us, it's just been really on my mind the last week or so, even leading up to the anniversary and everything that's been going on the last couple of years due to the pandemic, that just keep remembering and acknowledging that teachers and educators, the scope of their responsibility and the weight of their responsibility just continues to grow and expand and change. And as much as we can consider supporting them, Devin's mentioned this before as well about, we talk a lot about the mental health of students, but throughout the budget process, ask our administrators to also keep teachers in mind, because they are doing, they're carrying so many hats and doing so many different things that go far beyond just lesson planning and education. Make sure that we are providing resources for them as well.
Thank you. I do want to just say thank you to Jenny for her comments and for keeping us all mindful of the day and the weight of the day. And also, I wanted to thank Jenny for keeping us focused on giving each other grace. She's made comments about the need to give each other grace and to give each other room to make mistakes and room to come back from those mistakes and collaborate with each other and trust each other. And it's something that, as Jenny has said it, I've always sort of checked myself in the meetings, go, right, that's right. You're supposed to do that. That's what it means to be a good person, right? And to be kind and caring towards others. And then I take that back home and I try to remember, am I being as kind and thoughtful as I can be to my kids? They're still just kids. And, even though we expect so much of our kids and them to do great things in this world, they need to be able to make mistakes. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. Any additional board member comments? Okay. All right, that will take us to reports from administration.
Thank you, John. I'm going to ask if Kim could share her report from Samuel Staples Elementary School.
I feel I need to reintroduce myself. I haven't seen you folks in quite some time. Hope everyone's well. I wanted to share with you news of the passing of our school mascot, Winter the Dolphin. She was adopted by Samuel Staples in 2010. We had a family at the time, the DeCipio family, who had traveled down to Clearwater. And during that entire year, we were talking a lot at the school about perseverance. And I happened to be an animal lover, and she came back and said she had met this injured dolphin, this infant dolphin that had been rescued, and her story was pretty powerful. So she brought back the book. I read the book. I contacted Clearwater Marine Aquarium and asked if we could adopt her. And lots of really special things have happened as a result of our adoption with Winter. And kids really identified, particularly kids who have handicapping conditions, really identified with her ability to persevere in spite of some significant challenges. And I contacted the aquarium very recently to share that as an elementary school up in rural Easton, where dolphins aren't really plentiful, that we rescued her and that we wanted to do something in some way to remember her at Samuel Staples. They were really quite surprised. Apparently, we're the only school outside Florida that has adopted Winter. And they have an entire tribute, a legacy that is sort of in the works at Clearwater Marine Aquarium, which is a full-on marine hospital. And I gave them my contact information to reach out. But during the time of sort of, and I mean this sincerely, grieving, the kids have been very affected by her passing. And the parents of two of our kids reached out to me, Duvion Montoya, who is a very well accomplished mural artist himself, successful. He reached out to me and he said, would you like me to do a mural in tribute of Winter? And it took me all of 9 seconds to say, yes, I would, Duvion. I would like that very, very much. So we've toured the building and he has some pretty inspired ideas that involve scaffolding of some sort. So he's thinking spring or summer, which I'm certainly fine with. So I wanted to let you know about that. The kids do want us to adopt another dolphin. So I'm in the pursuit of trying to find another dolphin who need a little love from Samuel Staples. I also wanted to share with you, we have a pretty robust group of student senators at Samuel Staples. Students in every grade level have to write a speech, and the students in each of the class vote who the senators will be. And among some really very special things making the school connected, they just finished a collection for the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. And if you remember the story of Paddington Bear from London, who was a lost bear looking for his forever home, they sort of attached themselves to Paddington Bear. And each of our classes received a marmalade jar, and kids were to dig through cushions and seats to find loose coins. Well, Friday we wrapped it up and we found more than loose coins in the homes of Easton children. Lots of paper money was also donated. So we don't yet know the total amount, but oh my stars, I was pretty impressed with how generous our families of Easton are and how much the kids really enjoyed this. We actually had a visit from Paddington, all 5'1", who traveled around the school and on stage and in the cafeteria, and the kids were really very excited. So I'm very proud of the work around that. We also have a kindness club. 2 teachers in our school said we need to do something in some way connected to safe school climate, which is something we're required to do. This has a lot to do with making the school warm, inviting, and welcoming. So the Kindness Club have been meeting bi-monthly to spread kindness, from welcoming students upon arrival, which sometimes felt a little terrifying as the kids are dashing to the cars going, hello, and welcome to Samuel Staples. They have created, the kids themselves with the actors, some really very powerful videos, how one walks effectively in the hallway, how does one have a social conversation without becoming a disruption to math, what does good conversation look like in a cafeteria when we need to be socially distanced by 3 feet or more? So we have a shared drive where teachers can revisit those videos whenever they find the need. It's wonderful. But most recently, the students are connecting with the Connecticut Children's Hospital. And kids are being invited to wear their PJs on Monday, December 20th, and they're going to pay $1. And all of the dollars that we collect will be donated to the Connecticut Kids for PJs, because those kids who are very unwell, affected with pediatric cancers, spend most of the day in pajamas. So there's a wonderful opportunity for kids to show solidarity with these kids who are unwell, and have a little fun while wearing pajamas at the same time. So they're feeling really good about themselves and their ways to become civically connected. The last thing, which is less civic minded and more oral health minded, of all the schools in elementary school in Connecticut, we were selected among 57 to randomly participate in a health survey of only kindergarten and grade 3 students. The Connecticut Department of Public Health's Office of Oral Health, in collaboration with the Connecticut State Department of Ed, have created a program called Every Smile Counts. So in January, mid-January, we're going to have one licensed hygienist who will be sent to Samuel Staples to collect the following information: presence or absence of dental decay, presence or absence of dental sealants, need for routine or urgent care, and height and weight. So I have a letter that is scheduled to go out to the families on January 3rd. It will just go to kindergarten grade 3. And if parents do not wish to be part of this data collection, they can certainly opt out. They tell me it is less than a minute per child, and the teachers signed up for this wonderful rotation for kindergarten grade 3 to come through and have all of their oral health checked along with height and weight. Any questions for me?
I just want to say thank you for, I mean, you guys do so many great things to create a great culture and climate in the schools. The Kindness Club, you know, one of my sons is involved in that, and he loves coming home from those meetings and talking about the announcements and the videos, and you know, you see the signs out when you drop the kids off, and it's just very welcoming. And I think it's a good reminder of how you can build community in the midst of a pandemic, finding really creative ways to keep kids together and doing things together and support each other. So I just want to say thank you and acknowledge how important that is right now.
You're welcome. Thank you for recognizing.
Kim, one thing quick, long ago and far away before the pandemic, we had a buddy system where the 7th graders and the 2nd graders met, and 7th graders read books to the 2nd graders. And I understand that it probably is not something that we're currently doing, but is that something that you would consider?
We don't do it with the middle school, but 5th grade, 4th grade, and some 3rd grade have kindergarten buddies and preschool buddies.
Okay.
And they do just that. Most of them meet outside to do the reading that you just described. But on days when the weather is just inclement, they really do move mountains to go into large spaces like the small gym or the big cafeteria or the media center. Those kinds of connections are so important to see
Yes,
good
right.
models, good behavior, good reading.
And it's an opportunity for the younger kids to make a new friend with kids in the higher grades.
They love saying, I know him,
Yeah.
that's my buddy.
That's it.
Thank you for bringing that up. That actually is a really important part of our school that I'm really proud of.
Very good.
Any
Okay.
questions?
No.
Okay, Dr. Paul?
Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. You know, Jenny, I was just taking some notes. I just read an article, you know, with the anniversary of the remembrance of Sandy Hook. It was about how teachers have had to deal with so much. And they estimate in the last year, or through the pandemic, 50% of school-age kids have been through some kind of trauma. And it's often up to teachers to step in as counselors and social workers, and this new kind of level of this new phenomenon called secondary trauma stress, where we know that care workers who care for the children who are trying to absorb some of that. So it's kind of a new level of stress on teachers to be there to support their kids. So we know a lot of our kids have been through more abuse, neglect, distress than ever. And so teachers are absorbing a lot of that. So I know, Jeff, you ask almost every board meeting, do you have everything you need? This is probably a continuing area to keep looking at what we're doing for teachers and how we can support them. So it wasn't planned, but I'm pleased to announce that, while I can't give you the name yet, because it's not 100% official, Dr. McKinnon and I have an interview tomorrow, a final interview and walkthrough with our new SSO, who is a retired state trooper, has a great background. A lot of the officers in town know him and have speak very highly of him. Human Resources done a great job of continuing to work with PD to find that officer. So we're scheduled, as long as all goes well tomorrow, we're scheduled to have him start on January 3rd. So we will walk through with Dr. McKinnon and kind of a final interview. Hopefully that'll all go well. I do want to really recognize and thank Chief Doyle, all the Easton police officers who helped kept us safe throughout all this. They helped with traffic, they helped provide lunch and recess. I've personally gotten to know all the officers, so it's been a great experience for me. So I know all the officers. Captain Arnold and I are on a first name basis now, so and that's great for a great partnership between the middle school and PD. So Chief Doyle has not said no to me once, so it's been excellent. Really like to recognize that. Other staffing news. School counselor Sarah Terry has just returned from her maternity leave. Yesterday was her first day back. Again, I want to thank Kristen Burnham, who stepped in, and she was a high school counselor who had been raising children for the last 6 or 7 years and was looking to get back in the game. Was a little nervous about coming to middle school. She couldn't have been a better fit for middle school kids. In fact, when she left, I said, I think you found your next career path with middle school kids. She really gets them. So she did an excellent job. We were very pleased with her. Jack Bailey, who is our long-term, our building sub, has got an offer he can't refuse, as they say, to move on to a healthcare opportunity where he can actually run an office, run a division. So he's going to be stepping aside as of the first of the year. So we'll have 3 positions open still at Keller. There'll be the building sub, the bridges para, and the part-time cafeteria supervisor. Jack was great because when Jack wasn't assigned anywhere, he went right into bridges. So he kind of was filling two roles. I don't think he ever ate when he was here. He was always, he would sub and then he would go with bridges, and he was excellent. So he also seems like he has a calling for the work, but he can't pass up this opportunity. So we'll be working with HR to try to get those positions filled in the new year.
Can I see one more time again, that part-time cafeteria.
Part-time cafeteria,
Bridges
bridges
para.
para, and the building, the permanent building. sub.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fun. End of the first trimester, and just did a kind of a bird's eye view of the grades. Kids did really well. Went through all the report cards before they went out. Was really impressed. The first trimester tends to be a little bit easier because there's a lot of review, and especially this year, we wanted to have a good start. 68% of there was over 1,300 letter grades that went out on Friday. 68% were A's, 24% B's, 6% C's, and about 2% were D's or F's. So those are pretty good numbers. It's a great start to the school year, and just like as we wanted the kids to have a good, successful start to the school year. Attendance also, I looked at carefully. I've been really watching the attendance rates. We are at our highest attendance rate in 4 years. So we're over 96, almost 97% for attendance. The highest was in the last 4 years was in 18-19, which we were at 96-18. So we're just creeping a little bit ahead of that. That's impressive that our attendance, we're averaging about 4 kids absent a day, 3 tardies a day. So we're doing well. Yeah, doing well. So they want to be here. That's great. Continue to always talk about our parent involvement. Our Shelf Else program, I stole the name from you, Kim. We had over 15 hours were donated by the parents of kids at Keller to clean all these shelves. All the 7,000 volumes were picked up, dusted off, cleaned off, and resorted into new genres that are kind of a little bit more student friendly. So that was excellent work. Really want to thank all those parents who donated that. And I have 4 TED Talks. These are the Keller Educational Discussions. 4 of those planned for the new year. Matthew Rudy's coming in to speak to grade 7 about using storytelling in nonfiction writing. Rachel Calamino is a lighting engineer and interior designer coming into art classes. Phyllis Onimus is a writer and producer for TV. She actually did the Carson Daly New Year's Eve show this year. She's coming into Mrs. Burke's ILA class to discuss the writing process. And Christoph Goder, he runs a nonprofit organization called Charity Water that provides clean and safe drinking water to over 14 million African and Asian communities. He will be going to grade 6 social studies with Mr. D'Agostino, dovetailing in where he talks about the development of irrigation systems in ancient civilizations. So using and some of those primitive systems, so the ancient systems are some of the systems that Christoph is using even today to get water, clean water to people. So that'll be a cool experience. I think they might be involved carrying buckets of water at some point. So that'll definitely be out there. In the family newsletter, which is my next talk, we launched a new family newsletter. Hope you all got a chance to look at it. It's been getting a lot of nice feedback, especially the audio version of it. A lot of people like that. We figured it would be a good time saver for people in the car. So Annie Moore and I read all the articles real quick. It's about a 10-minute audio clip, and you can listen to it in the car and get up to date on all the news. I try to get that out there right at pickup time, because I know everybody's sitting in their car, so maybe you can listen to it or read it while you're waiting there. Lockers and Chromebooks went off pretty much without a hitch. It was well designed and went out there. We have just a few, less than 10 kids who are kind of regular customers. We have a cart of them we saved for kids whose Chromebooks either died during the day or they forgot them. So they come and they sign them out every day and they return them every day. So we're less than 10 now of our regular customers on that. So overall, it's gone really well, and lockers have been fine really. Annie Junior auditions were last week. We have a cast of about 30 actors who had their first rehearsals yesterday. So they run every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Christina and Ellie Newsom are the director and musical director. They're awesome. We've got our communication system down now. There was a few confusing things about there. One note, the early date, we originally had 11th and 12th as March 11th and March 12th as the play dates. We had to move it up a week, so it's March 3rd and 4th, which is a Thursday, Friday night. It was due to a conflict we didn't foresee. So that's excellent. There's so much energy around that. Oh my goodness, the power of the whole school if we can capture it. We have and our clubs and extracurriculars are continue to run at high levels. We have debate club just started with Mr. D. Chess club with Mr. Max starts right after break, and so does volleyball. So we're just going to keep cranking those out. Our participation rates have been full. All the clubs have been full. So I know that's going to be a big budget item at some point because that's been under a grant so far. But that has been like near 100% participation in all those clubs. If we had more space, and some of them we have waiting lists for kids. So super well attended, and really need to keep that as part of the budget next year. I know that I'm going to get that. And just one more thing on communications, we are posting our daily video announcements on the website every day. So the kids, the 7th graders, it's now 7th grade's turn. They're making video announcements every day. And we go ahead and post those. I usually do the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning and do some quick last minute announcements. There was a takeover today. Dr. McKinnon took over announcements today after did a great job of getting the day started for us. And then the kids have this video announcement that's out there. We post that on the website. So anybody who wants to know any of the other announcements that are going on can keep up to date on some stuff. It's a nice way for everybody to do that on a daily basis.
Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Clark.
All right.
Jennifer?
So I just want to say, every month, I give you guys numbers, and I realize it's very cut and dry. So, but I also like the idea of going after the building principals because they bring life to the building. So one of the things that I really was reflecting on was I think that, the board has a lot to be proud of in terms of what they have done for special ed. So I just wanted to capitalize on, I think some of the accomplishments, especially since we're going into the budget season. But the first is we have an amazing preschool program. Again, it's not reflected in the numbers. So we can get our youngest learners into the San Staples building. So we do have some complex kids in our preschool program. But when I go into those programs, I see these kids thriving. They're successful, they're making those connections. So, and I look at, they'll be at Staples for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So what a wonderful way to get these kids into the buildings early. We also have our Wilson teacher. This is something that the board put in place, I think about 3 years ago. We saw a need to support our middle school students. And, again, those students are thriving as well. We also see a reduction in needing intense structured literacy evaluation on the outside, because we have that in-house capacity in the middle school level. So I see some of these kids, they're coming up into the middle school, not being confident readers, that they're able to read, being able to read on grade level, you see their self-esteem, their confidence go up. And then last is the bridge program. And I think that that really at the middle school level rounded out your continuum. We've got a great group of kids, a fantastic teacher. And, those kids are going to leave Easton, go off to follow with a great skill set. And I think that's because of the wisdom and the foresight of putting these programs in place. These kids can go into, they could try out for the Annie play, and they are very much part of the fabric of the community. So I think that's a lot to be proud of. When you look at my numbers, what we do see a big change is in the number of PPT meetings. It's post-COVID, kids are coming back to learning how to be students again. So we've been having a lot of conversations with parents. What do the students need to be successful? What support and intervention can we put in place to allow these students to grow and to be successful? So really, that's a lot of what our conversation has been centering around. So do you have any questions for me?
Jeff, please.
I have a double.
Do you mind pulling your mouse down? So I can reach you a little
Be
bit?
able to see your mouth.
I don't mind it at all. I will happily pull it down. I did notice the significant increase in PPT meetings month over month.
Mhm.
And also the increase in 504 plans
Yeah.
month over month. That puts us at a total of 205 students that need some kind of intervention. And that's an increase of about 30 from last year at this time. Do you see a pattern as to what's driving this? Is it being driven by teachers and administrators inside the building saying, I think this child needs help? Or is this coming from the outside, parents, medical professionals who are saying, we feel like this child needs
I think
more
it's coming
support?
from a little bit of both. Let's talk about the 504s in a minute. We've been very fortunate. We had our special education attorney do a 504 retraining, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
What is our obligation and responsibilities under 504? What I am seeing is some of the kids are more anxious, and that's because their world were turned upside down because of COVID. So these kids, if you were already fragile, it became even more fragile over time. Masking certainly changes the way we interact with students. So we are seeing, I think, an uptick in the anxiety piece. So the question is, in order to qualify for special ed, we need specially designed instruction. Most of these kids need accommodation and modification. So that's really the deciding factor. So what we're seeing is that they really need accommodation and modification. So we usually start, that's why you're seeing that uptick in the 504s.
Mhm. perhaps I read the same article as Steve did, but the drills for active shooters. There was a big article out about the impact that it's having on kids and staff as well, making them so very anxious every time they go through this. Is this something that we need to, I mean, obviously we need the training, we want to be able to do that. Has there been any research or any thinking done about how often that needs to happen and what kind of help we would want to be able to give kids and teachers who are anxious about the entire experience?
I personally think that's part of a larger conversation outside of special ed. I mean, special ed could be a part of it, but when you look at school culture, school climate, and what our value set is, to me, that's part of a much larger conversation.
Okay. And the last thing that I had, and I don't know if this is a Scott question or if this is a special ed question, but I was going through the budget, as I love to do, I guess. And I noticed that we are planning to be in arrears on special ed teachers, administration. There's several negative numbers here where we're overspending our budget. Now, I'm hoping you're going to tell me that the grant money that we normally get is paying for some of this, and then perhaps the ESSER grants are paying for the rest.
I will have to get back to you on that.
Jeff, what accounts are you talking about? Just so I can.
Okay.
Special ed excess cost adjustment.
So what are the?
564, 563.
Yeah.
Is that where you are?
Yep.
Okay.
561, 563, 564. There was a couple of, let me get the administration. Special ed teachers, 105 is showing a negative $101,200. Special ed administrators, that's 60 plus thousand or $63,000. The whole thing is $164K. And so you throw that in with the salary non-certs, which is 112, which is another 73,000, and you're starting to build a pretty big negative pool. I'm hoping that this is grant stuff that would take care of it, but I don't know that. Well, before the ESSER grants, we never had this kind of money to cover this large of an expense. So I just want to be sure that we're on top of that and that we know.
I will, I'll definitely look into that. I'll also have to look at some of the PPT recommendations. So, but I can work with them with Dr. McKinnon.
Okay. But we haven't hired any more staff once the school year started.
We haven't hired teachers, but I have to go back and look at the PPT recommendation for para-educators and BTs. I don't have those numbers right at my fingertips.
Well, that would go a long way to explain salary not certified. As a board.
Is 138 in there as well? Pupil services, other support?
That would be stuff that wouldn't necessarily be special ed. 130. Yeah, that's 58 grand for the for pupil services other.
Right.
That could be special ed, but that could be, that could cover water.
Yeah. Okay, so deeper dive on that.
So we can get back to you. We can go through each of these accounts and develop a 1 or 2 page report and send you some information. And if that answers your question, good. If not, then we can take it from there.
Okay.
Good. Yes, Jenny.
No, we've had conversations over the last few years about caseloads. And I don't know if it's like two budget cycles ago or 3 budget cycles ago, we had discussions about caseloads for special ed teachers, and we're able to use that to increase some of our staffing. So, I mean, I think all of us need to know
what are those caseloads like for the current staff?
So-
I mean, are we pushing, are we at a reasonable level? Are we pushing what's unreasonable, and kind of how is that going to translate into what each building needs moving
Right.
forward? Hold on, I'm almost done.
Okay.
What each building needs moving forward as we're looking at next year's budget. And then also to the point Jason raised, I'm just thinking a couple of steps ahead. How is that going to, once the funding from the state and grants are finished, I think we just need to look long-term. We really need some sort of current and long-term planning as far as special ed and 504, because what the students and faculty are going through right now isn't going to go away after the funding goes away. So kind of what are we looking at in a couple of years is sort of like a cliff that we may fall off of, in terms of the budget.
So
Makes
right
sense.
now, one of the things we do monitor the caseloads very closely with the teaching. We want to make sure there is equity among the caseloads. So right now, the average teacher, I'm using average caseload, is between 6 to 8 students. That's the average. There are some teachers that may have more than their caseload. There is a difference between caseload and delivery of service. So basically, a case manager. So if I were to take let's just take a K1. I have one teacher that works in both K1. She may have 6 kids in her caseload, but she may also service other students, especially if they're Wilson certified. So a special ed teacher can be responsible for the management of the paperwork for 6 to 8 students, but they actually may deliver instruction to more students along those lines. So there is that. The other piece that we should always be mindful of is we need to look at what our continuum is. And that's what I had talked about earlier. When you put the bridge program in middle school, you rounded out your continuum. Right now, we are not projected to have any student outplaced on Town Power next year. That's just right now. And to me, that is a true testament to putting in a continuum. That could change tomorrow, depending on, special ed is a moving target. But that is one thing we should always be mindful of, is what continuum do we have? Do we need to expand that continuum? Or at some places, do we need to shrink that continuum based on what student needs are? So if you look at our BASIS program, which is designed for students with autism, you may be only servicing maybe 2 or 3 students. But if you were to weigh what the cost would be to have them in-house versus what the cost would be to send them out, and what are some of the emotional benefits from that too. So I think you have to weigh both. Yes, I mean, I do recognize that one of your large expenditures is in special ed, but at the same time, what does that look like long-term?
I just want to be clear, I'm not in any way questioning our special ed expenses or looking for anyone to trim them at all. My concern is, do we currently have the capacity to absorb, do we have the appropriate staffing to absorb the increase in special ed referrals, the increase in 504s, the potential increase in IEP services, and that's what I'm looking for. Devin, help me out here.
504.
You monitor very closely.
First tier, second tier,
Tier.
just interventions. That's my concern. Is just wondering, does our current staffing meet this increased need? And what are we going to need for next year? And then once the funding is no longer available, how are we going to budget for that moving forward?
I understand that concern. I think that's a conversation that, Dr. McKinnon and I we always look at, do we make sure we have the capacity to serve the kids? I think right now we're in good shape, but I do have to partner very closely with the building principals because, they oversee the intervention program. And we want to make sure that those programs are strong, because the stronger the intervention is, the stronger the intervention, you should not be seeing those withdrawals, the special ed. So that's why it's very important to have that partnership with, with the building, with the Gen Ed side. And I think we do have open and honest dialogues about, how we can support this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I heard there was, Jeff, questions from you about the identified budget object summary. And I went through and I circled the accounts that you talked about. And I said that we provide a 1 to 2 page report on those areas to provide more information.
Right.
And then Jenny, your question was around our current capacity and staffing to handle the increases in PPTs and 504s in our numbers right now. And what does it look like budget wise? And what are the implications once those grants expire? That was your question as well, right? Is to kind of talk about what the budget impact of the grants and what the grants are currently covering, and when they expire, they're up, and so what the implication of the budget is then.
And just thinking ahead, because once we absorb these students into the system and into the programming, I mean, I don't imagine that the stresses and the increases from COVID are going to end nice and neatly when the additional
budget
funding
year,
ends.
yeah.
That these children are going to be with us and we need to be with them for the long haul.
So what's our long-term
Yeah,
plan
what's
as we think
exactly.
about servicing kids who have undergone significant trauma?
Right.
How are we thinking about that from a budget perspective, a personnel perspective, a mental health perspective, a curriculum perspective? Just knowing that in a year, 2 years, 3 years, there's still probably going to be lingering impact.
And I'm particularly interested in exploring the personnel side of the equation, because there's no way that we're the only district having this problem. So we know what the job market looks like right now, or how bad it is for recruiting. If that's going to be a real challenge, and I think we need a strategic approach to that.
Can I go back to the active gun shooter training?
Yes.
Because you didn't get a response. We don't do active gun shooter training in either building.
Okay.
Did you mean lockdowns?
Lockdowns.
So
Yeah.
lockdowns are done because state law says they need to be done throughout the year. We don't get into great detail with regard to an active gun shooter in our buildings. We often talk to the kids about just emergencies, such as a tornado coming through the glass and why we come around in the cubby area and hide. Sometimes we talk about there could be a bad person, but we don't get into great detail about active gun training in that regard. I just didn't want you to have that impression of the two schools. Okay.
One more. It would be, I think, helpful just understanding also the teacher side of the trauma that our educators are going through, our staff members. Like, how are we dealing with that as a system, right? And then how are we training? I think it was great to hear about the additional 504 training. I think that's really important. But then are we doing, and I know that this happens in our buildings, but like, what are we doing in terms of trauma-informed practices and just helping teachers deal with the anxiety that they're seeing in their classrooms? And, that's such an important part of keeping kids learning, is like, so how are we helping them to address those needs, like in the room at the moment of stress?
All right. Any other questions? I'm going to defer my time to and talk a little bit about the updated budget process when we get there. So, I'll wait.
Was Scott going to?
Oh,
present
sorry,
as well?
yes, Scott, if anyone has, so Scott shared the budget of the summary, and the other further questions. Right, I thought Jeff and.
Jeff, I just, Dr. McKinnon said you wanted to see last year's end of the year report. Cognos was down, so we couldn't run that for you. That's why you don't have it. So they're down for maintenance, or scheduled maintenance, so I will run that tomorrow. We're back up and running and send it to all the board members. you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay, now my understanding, Scott, is that we have not closed the books for last year. Is that accurate?
I think Easton's all set, so I think, I believe Easton's all set.
Okay, so we'll get more information about the closeout of the books and the end of budget season. End of that budget year
I
report.
want to know what your own expense was. And
I want to know how much money if we had money at the end of the year,
yes,
and if we did, how much. And we still, as a board, need to make a decision as to how that's going to be handled. Whether we use it for school issues or whether we give it back to the town. But it's important to know how much it is.
Okay, I understand.
John, did we go through the health reserve already?
We did not.
Is that next or is that later?
Yeah, I don't know. Are we going to have an opportunity? Do you have specific questions, Randy, you want to
Yeah.
ask? Good.
Yeah.
And a note, just as we get any reports that, the systems are down or anything like that, any reports that we talk about inside of these meetings, we want to make sure that they get posted, sort of appended to the materials for this meeting.
Right.
So if we can make sure that those are posted online, I think that'll be helpful for the board and the public. Randy, you want to go?
Sure, so I'm looking at the last column, right, the far right column, Scott, and we start the year off at 9/12. And I'll go back and look at my June meeting notes, that sounds about right. Claims paid, HSA, admin fees, deposits. And then we go contributions, and then BOE approved additional contributions, 344, call it. That number stumps me.
The 343,
Yeah.
567?
Yeah. And because I don't know, my memory stinks, but I seem to recall that we didn't contribute any more at the end of this year because we had a hefty reserve, we didn't need to, so I don't think that number is right, but we can, it's not, we don't have to figure it out tonight, but I think that number should be 0.
I remember.
Yes, that number should be there.
Yeah, well, we should figure out exactly what's going on with that number, but you're absolutely right. We did not make additional contributions.
But I think otherwise, and I didn't run the math, but I think where we are today, 1,000,001, that does look right based on everything above, with the exception of the BOE additional contributions. But looks good.
And I apologize, I apologize. I don't have the history on that. So I don't know what you did at the end of the year, but.
So as a part of the budget process, the brief history, and Jeff, you've got a lot of this, and Randy does this well in church, and he does too. Flipping around, pulling it up. The brief history is at the end of the year, we oftentimes take a look at things and make sure that we have enough to cover. And for last year in particular, the fund balance was in very good shape. I think the recommendation from the provider was 25%, and we were right around 25%. So 3 or 4 months. Yeah, 3 or 4, exactly, 3 or 4 months.
Of claims.
Exactly. And so we did not make additional contributions at that point. So this number is strange to see on that line, and I think we just wanted to figure out where's that coming from and how does it all add up with that? If that is 0, like we think it should be, where's that from?
Okay. So this obviously will play into the end of year balance discussion.
Right.
Right.
In a very big way.
Yeah.
Right. And the same conversation we'll start having again in May. Randy, did you have anything else on that or anything else in the?
No, and if I think of anything else, I'll shoot.
Good.
You guys know.
Right, very good.
One more thing, Scott, if we could take a look at water and electric and just have a conversation about that, because right now those are showing to be negative by the end of the year. And I want to make sure that we have that properly covered. The current year warrant.
Yes.
Okay, let me, go back. I'll send you an email. That'll probably be easier than holding it up.
John, I have a question.
Please.
I'm not sure where this would fit in. Do we need to address or talk about reimbursement for cafeteria or reimbursement for school
We
lunches?
Yeah, we absolutely do need to. I think we're at the point where there's a little bit of additional work that needs to be done to present, to pull together all the facts of it and present it very clearly, because we absolutely don't want any misunderstandings about what went on. So Dr. McKinnon is doing that work now, obviously with the partnership with Scott and others. And so I think the intent is it next month, we would hope to have the review of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I presented to you on a memo of kind of what happened in terms of the history behind the claims reimbursement from the state and how that whole process works. But in terms of, for example, I've got a question from Jeff today about what is the current balance of the food services account. That is a moving target because there are lunches that are being, students are still paying for lunches when they paid for additional lunches. So money is coming in. Chartwell is still billing us for meals that they provided. And then there's a relationship between how many meals we provide and the reimbursement that we get from the state and what you've contributed to the past to that account for breaks, fixes. And so I could have pulled the statements together and provided you with statements of what's in that account, but it doesn't explain kind of the relationship of what's going in and out. So I think that probably be best served in a presentation.
Okay.
And I think, Jenny, I think we absolutely need to sort of understand exactly what happened and sort of how it's working, sort of everything into the future. So.
And that's another reason, for understanding what our balance is from the end of last year, in case those dollars have to go into that account
That's right.
to get us back to even.
That's right. I think the rough read of it is it does not look like we need to do anything sort of above and beyond right now. We don't have to go to the town and say, hey, we need more money right now. Like,
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And we just got another check today from the state, so revenue's coming in.
Good.
So
I don't want to pile on, but if there's a process that we can discuss, or you can just share with us.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, these chairs change, and without the legacy process written down someplace, the person coming in behind, so.
Right.
Because as many things probably operate in central office with a person or two, but may not have a check and balance, because this shouldn't have happened with a check and balance sort of type system. Because if it's beholden to one person and that person's delinquent, then we end up in or maybe, I don't know if that was what caused this, but if we have a cause analysis, then we can look at it. It couldn't happen again.
Yeah.
well, we developed, we learned of this, I learned of this in probably October, I think.
About
and
3 weeks in.
Informed the board of the process. And then Scott didn't join us until later. But if you recall, just since we're talking about it, students pay for lunch normally. Let's say they pay $4 for lunch. That money goes into a food account. And Chartwell charges us for lunch, and the money comes out of the account and pays for Chartwell's. And then over the last couple of years, the state has been, the federal government has been reimbursing us for meals through the child nutrition program. And that reimbursement, all we had to do was identify how many lunches we were buying, submit that data to the state in a portal, which was done by Chartwells. And then we had to go into a portal and certify that the claims that were requesting are accurate. And the claims for the month of, basically November 2020 until this summer were not accounted for.
So our obligation is simply to verify what Chartwell's put in.
Yes.
So
Basically on a
It's a rubber stamp.
But I mean, look, what we had to do when we tried to recoup some of those funds is, what we had to do is write up a process. So I did a little root cause analysis, know exactly what happened and why. And then one of the things I had to submit to the state is, a process, a mitigation plan. So we have a process now on how to do it from A to Z. And in fact, I copied Dr. McKinnon again this month and, told him I'll take him off in a couple months, that we run smoothly. So we do have a process. This should never happen again. Shouldn't happen in the first place. Won't happen again going forward. So,
And then, one of the things you did when you appointed me and Scott was you approved us as signers for that account.
Did a special meeting for it.
So you know the process.
This is just one of those things that in the wrong context, with the wrong publicity, in the wrong hands during budget season, could absolutely become an ugly thing to have to deal with. So, I mean, thank you. It sounds like you are absolutely on top of it. I thoroughly appreciate the communication so far already. I just want to make absolutely sure that we are crystal clear, as transparent, things are published, posted on the website, information is available for the public if they want to review and understand how that affects district funding and what if any impact there's going to be on budget process, as we have to consider those funds or not.
Yeah.
So,
So I don't know, we don't know how this got missed, but I will tell you that there's a lot of state reporting requirements. There's a lot of activity that the central office has to do to run a school district, whether it's financial, whether it's food services, whether it's healthcare, whether it's benefits, whether it's, not to mention just teaching and learning and staff. And multiply that by 3, we've got 3 times the amount of state reports and so on. So these types of things happen when everyone is working to their max. And I don't think you can get any more out of the stone in terms of the amount of work that's done at central office. I'm not surprised mistakes like this haven't happened in the past, because a normal central office operating with one board of education has a lot of work to do. You've got 3 times the amount of work to do. And that doesn't even factor into the incredible amount of facilities projects that we are about to undertake. So I am concerned about, if you ask me something that you worry about, I worry about the future, about the state of our buildings and the facilities and how we're planning for the future. Because the one, we'll talk about this today, John, the one committee that we don't seem to have is the facilities committee. And the facilities committee is the committee that advocates for what the building needs so that we can put together a capital improvement plan, so that when we look at end of year funds, we can make a recommendation to the town. Okay, we may need to put $100,000 of unexpended funds, or recommend how the town may use that to replace a roof, for example. So I think it's complex and mistakes will happen unless you've got the absolute right team in place and the right process procedures. And we put the procedure in place, but there's still a lot of tasks that have to be done to run the district well, but also to avoid the icebergs.
Okay. We'll move on to discussion and possible action. First up is the updated overview of the budget process. So do we want to start with the timeline slide and then go into the presentation, or vice versa?
I think maybe the overview might help first.
Okay. So this guy first?
Uh,
Or your presentation?
On my presentation
Okay,
first,
good.
and simply because it might play into the
Yep.
the overview.
All right, I'm just gonna need one moment to get that presentation.
Yeah, here. We lost the start. Okay.
Is this the correct? one?
That's it. Thank you.
Sorry, just a little bit of rigmarole to make sure that we can have the camera and the presentation happening.
We don't have a camera.
I mean, our viewers at home, we have tens of 3 people watching. at once. No, I don't know. No. All right.
Okay, great. So we've started the budget process at central office, and we've met with all of our schools and departments twice. And as I was going through the budget the first time and looking at how your budget book is put together, I have some ideas on how to reorganize the budget accounts and to present the budget in the future. So when you look at this slide, budgets are organized by object when they're organized by these series. So there's the 100 series, the 200 series, 300s, 400s, 500s, and so on. And in the 100 series, you've got certified staff, paraprofessionals, secretaries, and so on. 200s is health benefits, Social Security, Medicare, workers' comp. The 300s are usually professional services. 400s, counted to doing with property, with repairs and maintenance, purchase services, transportation and tuition, and so on. And then you've got supplies, equipment, which could be classroom supplies, utilities, and dues and fees, right? So that's typically how, so budgets are organized that way. They're generally not presented that way, okay? I haven't seen budgets presented that way. So if you go to the next slide, what I've noticed that the 2 districts do is that you present the budget in a series of these objects, and you have over 400 objects. And so all of the things that you see on the left are separate accounts, in whether they're 100 or 200 or 300 and so on. What I'd like to do is to take those same accounts, not change them, but to present them into a kind of an image of what you see on the right, which is under a cost center. So reorganize the budget objects into those 100s, 200s, 300s, and put them under a kind of a category. Because in addition to having the 400 different individual accounts, the 611 account, which is like an instructional supply, you've got 15 different instructional supply accounts. Because they're organized by school and they're sub-organized by departments. And then you've got 17 different types of dues and fees accounts. So you might have a separate account with one fee in it, and that's an account. And so the idea is to take all of these different accounts and start identifying ways that you can collapse them together. You don't need a 611 account. You don't need 15 different 611 accounts. You really just need 2 611 accounts. A 611 account for Samuel Staples and a 611 account for Helen Keller. Now, that doesn't mean that we are hiding what goes into the 611 account. We could break that apart, show it to you in great detail. But really, you just need one number, right? How much money are we spending in instructional supplies in that 611 account? Let's say it's $50,000. Well, that's it. That's what we're spending. And tracking that number over time is easier when you're seeing it in one account. When you're seeing $50,000 split up into 15 different accounts and they're little pockets, it's very hard to make decisions about what's actually important. Plus, it's detail that the board does not need to see. Now, we can sort it and show you how much paper we're buying, how many crayons and pencils, and how many folders and pocket folders. We can actually give you that detail, but that's not usually how the budget starts, right? Like you normally present the categories, you tell a story, this is the narrative, this is what we're trying to do, these are our goals and objectives, this is how we're going to get there. We're worried about revenue, we're worried about special education, this is the story we want to tell. It's hard to tell that story when you present the budget by what's on the left, which is a series of objects, rather than what's under a cost center. Okay, so that's one thing I noticed. When I open your budget book, if you go to the next slide, John, it's basic, again, it's organized by budget object, right? So it literally starts off with 111 general education teachers, then 112 salary non-certified, then 114 other payments certified, then 115 other payments non-certified, then 211 life insurance, then 221 social medical insurance non-certified, then 240. It's very disjointed. And it just reads like a phone book. Right? Here's the phone book. Yep.
I don't want to stop it, but I do want to stop it because I agree,
Yep.
1000%. We have one challenge or two challenges. Last year, we changed systems, and when we went to present the budget, couldn't compare anything to the prior year.
Right.
Which is the holy grail. Right? What's increasing and why? What did we spend last year? Whether you group it into one number or into 600 numbers,
Yes.
all anybody wants to know is why did the numbers change year over year?
Right.
So as long as we can go back, and I don't know if we can, whatever format we presented in this year, going forward in 3 months, 4 months, can we present last year's in that same format so you have a walk or comparison?
Yeah, we deeply, like, we understand that is one of the core philosophies of presenting a budget, right? Not only do you want to present, well, what I think you should do is not just present what you asked for last year, but what did you request last year, and what did you actually spend, and is there a delta up or down based on that? And that you should take that scenario and look at it for the last 5 years, right? So you should have 4 to 5 years of data. Now, unfortunately, I do understand the difficulties that the district had because you changed 2 financial systems from Phoenix to eFinance Plus. And then you also changed multiple finance directors. And so at some point you've got to make a decision. This is the new system we're going to use from moving forward. And you may lose some data comparison, but really the objective is much better in the long term if you decide on what your approach is going to be. So we will try to be able to show you that year over year analysis, because I know that's really important. And for the most part, I think we've developed a tool that can do that. But we can't go back as many years as we'd like to, just because the changeover from Phoenix to.
You're only gonna have 1 year.
That's right.
Believe me.
We're gonna have 1 year, however, I believe there still were some account changes.
Yes.
From the previous finance director to finance director from 2 times ago.
Yes.
To the last year's finance director, right? So even then, even if we had the data, some of the accounts are different. Okay. But this, again, when I started reading this and I started meeting with the departments, my head was spinning. I've been doing this for a long time in terms of why we're jumping from, and then I understood what it is that you're doing. You're literally going in order, like a phone book, 111, 112, 113, and And that works, but it doesn't, I don't think it lends anything to the
When you
conversation.
say it like that, it makes us seem stupid.
What's that, the phone book approach? Well, I know, listen, I've talked to you, and I know this is, that this was challenging for you as well, right?
Yeah.
And so you can, yeah, so, if you go to the next slide,
I think we're just so used to sit
Okay.
there with the binder,
We're
you
used
pull
to
out the
insanity.
highlighter.
right?
That's right. That's
Go
exactly.
So
through it page
what
by
we've been working on is organizing the budget by cost center, and the cost centers would be the following. Each school would be a cost center. Special education or PPS, however you call it, that would also be a cost center. Facilities would be an individual cost center, technology, district-wide, and curriculum instruction. The district-wide accounts include the things that run the district. So food services, transportation, professional services like legal fees, those things belong in a district-wide account. You don't need to say, we have a legal account fee for Samuel Staples and we have a legal account fee for Helen Keller, because we don't use legal services that way, but that's how we've organized them, right? And so organizing them by cost center is the ultimate goal. And so on the left are the cost centers, on the right is how it would appear in our sheet that we're developing for you, right? So Helen Keller, that's a cost center, Samuel Staples, a cost center, pupil personnel services, facilities, technology, district-wide, curriculum instruction, central office. Now, that's a sample. These budget numbers are, maybe on or off. I'm just saying that for the people watching at home, but that's an example. So then you would click on those links, and those links will take you to the actual cost center. This isn't a live document. This is just a kind of a presentation. But if you go to the next slide, I mentioned before that a cost center, a cost center a school is a cost center. And then when we go into a cost center, we're going to organize the cost center into 3 categories: certified staff, non-certified staff, and operations. So certified staff are admin, teachers, and the stipends that go to the certified staff. And the non-certified staff include custodians, secretaries, paraprofessionals, nurses, and also stipends and so on, which also go to the non-certified staff. And then we would organize the operations into these categories: conferences and travel, dues, fees, and other professional services, instructional supplies, library books, periodicals, textbooks and classroom libraries, standardized testing, general supplies, equipment, instructional equipment, non-instructional, and other. And so that's how we would organize a cost center in a certified, non-certified, and an operations standpoint. So when we present Helen Keller, you'd see those 3 categories. When we present Samuel Staples, you'll see those 3 categories. And when we present the schools in Reading, you'd also see those categories as well.
And you're hopeful anyway, let's put it that way, that we'll be able to see 2021 budgeted and expenditures, because we won't have this year, we'll have budgeted for 21-22 budget, but we wouldn't have expenditures yet, or what we actually spent, because we'll only be 8 months through the year. I'm not gonna, you tell me what you think you'll have as far as comparison data for this.
So we should be able to compare this. We should be able to compare last year and what we actually spent, what we requested, and what we put in 2021. 2020, 2022. Sorry, 2020, 2021. So you'll be able to compare this current year to what we were requesting last year. And I think we could put in 2019, 2020 data as well. So it's only going to be
That was 3D finance.
No, sorry, it's going to be this year. No, it's only going to be this year. And then what we're budgeting for next year.
2021 and 21, 22.
Yes, 20, 21, and then 21, 22.
So the year that ended last June, 6 months ago, 5 months ago.
Yes, we'll be able to have that.
That'll be in here as actual and budgeted, so 2 columns for that
Yes.
fiscal year.
Yep. So
Okay.
you'll see 3 columns.
And then budgeted for 21, 22,
Yes,
not actual because we're not through it yet.
that's right.
Perfect. That's great.
Dr. McKinnon, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. If I could just say that I love the idea of having a consolidated view and having really just the main drivers brought forward to explain any key variances. On this chart, this may be a work in progress, but it would be helpful if in the analysis that we received to have the calculated variances, that the dynamics, year to year changes or any sort of data that will help us see trending in terms of percentages, not just absolute value. Thank you.
For reports that we do each month or for when we budget next year?
For budgets specifically, I'm thinking about in terms of, looking at deltas in percentages as well.
So in addition, we'll have a column that says the value that we budgeted in previous years, what we're requesting next year. It'll have what the delta is, and it will have the percent change.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
But that is a given, but that's not the exciting part of kind of the tool that we use. So, John, if you go,
If you could do that, that'll be very exciting.
okay, well, yes, we can do that, but the next piece is even better. And so, if you go to the next slide, John, we're going to develop this in Google Sheets, and the reason is because when we work with schools and we say, okay, let's go back to the instructional supply account, 611. You've got $50,000 in that account. If I say to the schools, listen, I want you to add $6,000 for classroom libraries, and your amount is going to go from 50,000 to 56,000. Or if I say, I think you're spending too much money on copy paper. We have copy paper in the district. I want you to decrease that line from 50,000 to 40,000. Anyone from the school that you give permission to can make the change in the Google Sheet, and it will automatically trickle up to the master roll-up sheet, right? So right now what we do is we say, okay, let's make that change. And then someone goes into eFinance Plus and they make the change. And then I've got to click save. And sometimes we don't click save and the change isn't actually factored into the system. Then after we do that, we've got to download a spreadsheet. And then once we get the spreadsheet, we've got to share it. The value of Google is that any change you make is instant, but it also keeps a record of the changes that you make as well. So if I say to one school, cut that area to 10,000, or I say to another school, increase that area by 10,000, it increases it at the 611 account, but it also increases it at the school cost center. Then it also increases it overall in the budget. So the change happens immediately, which is the most important thing that we can do.
And Dr. McKinnon is not articulating the full scope of the pain, because then those Excel spreadsheets would get generated in the past and distributed to us, we would have a spreadsheet with 100 tabs, and you'd have to go hunt down which tab different pieces run. You remember trying to navigate those tabs last year? It was
And then you have to build your own live spreadsheet to like actually track the numbers.
yeah, I did. I spent hours building
Yeah, it's
my
awful.
own version so that it could actually put it together in a meaningful way.
And then I still don't.
So you say you, who do you mean by you?
What do you mean by you?
Changing the Google Sheet.
Who has the
Oh,
ability?
well,
Appropriate people.
we'll decide who has user access. But certainly it will be administrators, right? So myself and Dr. Clapp and Mr. Petrozelli and Mrs. Cram. And then if a school administrator empowers someone in their level, like the secretary, if they're working with you, they can make the change as well. It may not be necessary to go to that level. But the next bullet point is really important, because in Google, you can develop filters that will filter each cost center and individual account in various ways. So we will give you the big picture, but if you want to go in and look at every single 611 account, you'll be able to filter just by that account, and it will filter and give you a summary of how much money is in that 611 or how much money is in the 800 dues and fees. So you'll be able to do that. We can also develop default views so that you can play around with a spreadsheet and sort things the way you want to, and then close it. And the next time you open it, it'll default to what your setting is. So it will bring you back. So you can play around with it without worrying about getting lost. Because if you close it and open it again, it will just bring you back to the beginning. Right. So we can actually preset your filters to open where you need to open each time. So that is really powerful. Yes.
Anyways, me finished. Oh, go.
Okay.
Follow up.
So that will allow you to, slice and dice the budget however you'd like. We will give you access to certain tabs. So there will be tabs like your Excel spreadsheet across the bottom. We can lock those tabs, so only certain people can see certain tabs at certain times. And the other important piece is that if you truly want to have a zero-based budget, then you don't build your budget based on what you did last year. You truly ask leaders to go back and say, well, how much paper do you really need? Survey what you need in your building. And if you need $50,000 worth of paper, then that's a significant amount. Did you go out and get 3 quotes? Because maybe there's a cost savings in getting 3 different quotes from either school specialty, Staples, or whatever supply company you need, and attach that quote and hyperlink it to the document. And so, we'll be doing that kind of work as well. So we're in the process of building it. I'm going to click, actually, John, if you click on the sample.
I need access.
Oh, that's right. You don't have access yet.
And you definitely don't want to give me access to it right now.
I do not want to give you access to it right now. You know why? Because it's still draft. So, I don't think, I don't mind giving you access.
Yeah, no.
Right, but I don't
I
think
promise not to mess it up. I had seen a sample of this. Jason did the explanation like that, and then Sarah came in. This was 2 Fridays ago. Sarah came in and Sarah's good fine. And I thought I had some ideas about, what you want to do, and you get the data in, and Sarah just completely knocked my socks off. Like had it set up exactly right, better than I could have imagined. Did you just approve access?
I tried to give you access,
Okay.
and I can't give you access. So she's got it locked down, so
That
I
sounds
can't
right.
share it. So we can't even share access at the moment.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you'll also be able to, if somebody makes a change, you can look at the little log and make sure.
Right.
You can look at all the different changes.
Yeah.
Right.
And who made it?
That's right. Completely audited, right, in a much better way than Excel, right? And no more forked versions. Oh, gee, I didn't realize that, Vicky was making changes, or that we were getting input from Kim, and then, but, Steve was doing something at the same time. Like, that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Vicky has really great human resource spreadsheets. And so because it's in spreadsheets already, we'll be able to take some of your data and your staff and actually put it straight into the sheet. And then our goal in January is to present to the board a staffing report that will be built and kind of built with the same format as the budget, so that you'll see the staffing report and you'll see the budget, and they'll look similar. So you'll be able to notice the difference. And obviously present the enrollment information as well. But this leads me to, if you go back to the idea, if you go back to slide 5, that's that slide there. Yeah. So in summary, we are going to organize the budget slightly different. We're not going to organize it via the 100s, 200s, 300s objects. We're going to organize it according to cost center. It's taking us time to organize things by cost center. We do have a model developed for Easton and Helen Keller, but we need to take that model, field test it, scale it up to include several stakeholders, get the other schools working as well. And because of that, we're probably pushing back the timeline for when we actually present the budget to you, and that's what we're going to talk about next.
Can I just ask my question?
Oh, yes, sorry.
It's sort of, it's along to that. I mean, it's somewhat addressed, but Google always gives me pause in terms of security. You know, it is so easy to make a copy, share a copy, even though you might have, you know, I can have securities in place, but as soon as someone is able to even view it, all it takes is a make a copy. So I don't know if there's additional security that I'm just as a sort of layperson, you know, teacher, educator, for someone who's not aware of. I mean, I know that you can track history, you can see who's made changes, et cetera, but just in terms of the information and all of it, just being somewhat easy to share outside of the district with other Google users would be my concern. So I guess I think I would maybe like to understand a little bit more, or I don't know, a tutorial or someone to, you
Oh,
know,
sure,
just
we
kind
can
of
do
walk,
that. I love
walk me
Yeah.
through, or
And-
maybe from Sarah, like a little
Yeah.
presentation about the security.
We can, Google has improved in terms of settings, what you can share and how you can control sharing. Like, for example, I have edit access, right, to this document, but I couldn't share it with John. But just then, I just tried, I couldn't share it. And we were doing teacher interviews, we were doing principal interviews for Reading Elementary School. And we shared information to the committee in a shared drive. And we made the shared drive available where they couldn't copy the documents. And they only had access to the shared drive for a certain amount of time, and then we removed access. So they only had it for a certain, like 6 hours, and then they couldn't even get into the document, the shared drive anymore. So there's a lot more, that there are tighter controls on copying, sharing, editing, and so on. And even to the point where what user can see certain filters, what user can go into certain tabs. And so we'd be happy to share that with you.
I would also add, we should discuss policies around personal identifiable information and making sure, especially Vicky does have some really powerful spreadsheets. Let's make sure that none of the sort of names and sort of that information finds its way into a space that could be more broadly shared.
And then the other piece is how is, well, I see it up there, how is the board of finance going to interact with the information?
Yeah, and I think it does go back to Randy's comment, which I have been beating the drum on relentlessly, Randy, that we got to be able to see what's the delta and be able to play that back. I think some of the real sort of genius of the way that Sarah's setting this up is flexibility to be able to pivot and say, show me all by this way. Okay, now just give me a view this way. I think what we're talking about here is the primary way in which we're going to present it, but flexibility to say, give me this alternate view is going to be there, which is really promising. When we look at this, you know, I think Dr. McKinnon is talking about, hey, we need a little bit more time in order to sort of do this, but this is actually not very different. Certainly, we're ending up at the same place with the sort of March conversations with board and finance, present, review, revise, that we always do. But even if we look at sort of February, that was where we had been this year and previous year, talking about putting all the different pieces together and bringing that all together. We're still talking about that. Just some of the order in which the pieces are coming together is coming a little bit differently. So Dr. McKinnon, I don't know if you want to talk about the sort of January, the sort of first meeting in January, second meeting in January, and sort of what your vision is for that.
Yes, so okay. So there are still some major drivers in the budget that we're missing some data on. I know that Scott and Vicky met with Brown and Brown this week, and they're working on kind of what the healthcare numbers are. But at this stage, the numbers are still soft. So we have an estimate, and the increase is high. I'm hoping that increase comes down. As you know, we budgeted for fuel prices last year of $2 a gallon. You know where the oil is at the moment, and so a lot of school districts have not locked in. And and Scott has put a number in the budget at $3 a gallon for fuel oil prices. And hopefully that changes. And we're studying how we can join a consortium of districts that is going to value buy and get that number lower. But you can see that the oil market alone is going up and down dramatically based on COVID, right? And what's happening with the number of cases.
With gas.
What's that?
With gas.
Are you all gas?
Yeah.
Okay.
But gas is up too, so I
Sure, I
assume
mean,
that's.
it's the same, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think those drivers, along with the idea of us redesigning the budget process, I'm nervous about presenting in the second week of January. And we propose to present in the third week of January on a Saturday and have a budget style workshop where we present Easton at 10 o'clock on Saturday, January 22nd. And we present Reading at 12 o'clock on Saturday, January 22nd. And then after that initial presentation, it comes the 2-hour style where we download everything for you. Then that's when your budget workshops and we resume according to the normal schedule.
When is the holiday weekend? In January? Is that?
That is the weekend before. The 15th.
It is.
It is.
Yeah, you're right. That's.
Yeah,
So we
actually, that
wouldn't-
was our target date. And we realized we couldn't break that.
We wouldn't do the January 24th budget workshop. That would be replaced by the Saturday, January 22nd.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, you're talking about the calendar
I'm
that was
looking at the
distributed.
calendar, yeah.
So we have updates. I think that's either it's the next or the next agenda item. And yeah, we have updates to that. This should be the last page of your packet for today and those dates. Are these updated already?
No, these are,
Okay.
I have the updated.
So is the purpose behind the Saturday to just extract that from a regular board meeting? Because that would typically be a part of a regular board meeting agenda.
I think on that January 11th meeting is probably where we would present to you the student enrollment and staff report. We'd like to develop the staff report and student enrollment based on Crowder. So that meeting would be kind of queuing up the budget presentation.
Does it have to be a separate meeting? Could it just be part of the January 22nd?
We have a regular meeting.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, is that the regular meeting?
Yeah, and it sounds like we maybe have some other topics. We maybe are going to be diving into the FDA reimbursement question on the 11th. So we may have some other things.
I think it's important to separate it out like this.
Yeah.
We can typically have the budget, again, not that typically has to continue. I
Sure.
don't mean to say like we have to keep doing it the way we always did it. But I think it is helpful to have that separate class size, students, staffing, just talk about the people and the kids. It is a separate conversation because it is such a big and important part of the budget.
I agree. And I like to sort of take that information in and kind of sit with it for a little bit before we dive in and see the rest. Okay.
So I presented you with a kind of an updated version which reflected that change.
Okay.
Are we now on to that? Are we on the beat?
Are we any other questions before we move on to the meeting schedule?
In a brief answer, just a philosophy of how you present a budget. We went through the process sort of philosophically. We've had past superintendents who sort of blue sky it. They go to buildings and say, what do you need or what do you want as opposed to you need? And then it starts up here and we kind of whittle away at whatever. What's your sort of big picture philosophy?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I do try to talk about where we're going, where we should be going in the next couple of years. But I'm also not going to hide some of the things that concern me, and I'll put in the budget. If we feel like there's a weakness in a certain area, then we'll talk about that as a budget increase, and try to link that together with some background and rationale as to why we think that request is needed. So what you're seeing really is how we're going to change the tool. But what I haven't showed you yet is our vision for what the budget booklet is going to look like. And the budget booklet is going to be more like it's going to have a table of contents and executive summary. It'll go through each cost center and say, these are the major drivers in this cost center. And then you'll have a pop-up section that will give you kind of a, this is a request, this is some data, this is the budget impact, this is the value added, this is the return on investment. So I hope to kind of tell that story in sections along the way. And if you organize the budget according to cost center, then you can share that narrative much more easily. The other change, which will be hard, and I know this might be hard for you, Randy, is you want to see certain accounts compared with how you've seen them in the past. Well, I may pull technology, software and equipment and maintenance out of a school cost center and put it in an IT cost center. So we'll try to develop the Google tool. I know Sarah, we've been talking about this, to allow you to still go back and look at that account compared to where it was before. But software maintenance or software supplies may not be in a school, it may be in a technology. And what you see for facilities like buildings and repairs may not be in a school, that may be in the facilities cost center. And you're not going to see transportation and fuel oil, we definitely see fuel oil, you're not going to see gas in a cost center, you'll see gas in a district-wide account. So that's going to take a little bit of getting used to it.
But because they're doing the data mapping now, it's all starting with sort of our new accounting system, we'll be able to take a look at this year's budget and see it in those same terms. So we'll still be able to see what is the difference. It's just using the new definition.
Can I just share an observation? It isn't necessarily budget related, just in terms of feedback. Jason, since you have joined us, our meetings and conversations, the way that you organize things, your thought process, the way that you frame roles and responsibilities, like I can so clearly see the impact as you're talking. I can visualize, okay, if I could duplicate Sarah, what the district, like sort of what could happen. I don't know. I mean, I think just your leadership and the way you see things and the way you articulate them, I get such a clear vision of if we had two Vickies, what would be possible for this district? If we had two Sarahs, what would be possible for this district? If we had a facilities person, like I can just see the whole thing sort of, it's like we knew we needed it before, but when we go through all of this and you're leading us through these conversations, I just get this crystal clear visual picture of sort of what the future could be if we could invest in additional folks in these key places. So I don't know what value that has whatsoever other than to say, just to share that.
Well, I think Sarah was an incredible addition. And she is able to help us execute. It's just like having another key person. So I can't tell you how many times that Sarah, Vicky, Stephanie, and Scott and I sit in a room together and say, this doesn't really work the way we want it to work. Let's do it this way, and how does that work? And it's just a team approach, right? So one of the best things that I did was put a TV the size of that whiteboard in my office And we can Chromecast and we can Apple share and we can use, and we have that, and we are constantly putting things on that and changing, right? So John, you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
And we've just got some really good people. And
Imagine if you had like Sarah 2.0 or assistant, and Stephanie could have somebody helping her execute, and I don't know, it just.
yeah, and I think another key part of this is once we get through, once we're here for a while and all working together, is actually involving our school administrators a little bit more, because they're all really excellent at leading their schools. And today we had a conversation here at Helen Keller about instructional strategies. And the goal is to have a common framework of instructional strategies district-wide, so that when we, the one thing I noticed that ER9 does do is that there's a leadership team that actually goes to each school and walks through classrooms together. And so the way to take that really good idea and to amplify it is to have a common framework. And so we had that conversation today with Dr. Clapp, with faculty, really early, like they meet at, like their faculty meetings at 7:20. And then on Friday, we're meeting with Simon Staples. Then when we get back from break, we're meeting with the other schools. So what's really exciting is the conversations we're seeing us have around budget and saying, well, let's just organize that and do it in a slightly different way. I hope to have that more about teaching and learning, but that's really what we have to, that's really what's going to impact. Right? Like these things are great to have conversations about, but these are the operational nuts and bolts, right?
This is gonna, I think this is going to make this conversation shrink year to year. And that's one of the key goals, right? Is we don't talk about this for 4 months, we talk about it for a month.
Yep.
And because the math is so easy to see, or the numbers are so easy to see that, okay, well, we're changing something here and then we move on.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about this from
That's
now
exactly
until
right.
April.
Well, and
So that's,
what I'm hoping we can do, I don't know that this is gonna make sense, but I have some intuition about it, is every month when we're getting the budget reports and we're seeing the summaries of how we're doing, we're using the same terms, we're using the same cost centers. And so we develop our fluency and the public develops a fluency with the language we're using. And so now when we come to the budget process, it's not, okay, wait, what is that bucket? We know it because we speak it every month.
Well, the cost centers actually makes sense based on
Right.
like what
It
we're
also
doing
helps.
versus like trying to memorize 2,000 or whatever different objects.
Yeah,
right.
It's a much cleaner.
Because a school has teachers,
Right.
certified staff, non-certified staff, and a whole bunch of operational things to run, right? And
Right, so you actually know if you're increasing costs in buckets, right? Like
Yeah.
versus.
Yeah, if you're increasing the number of teachers at 3rd grade, that falls in certified staff. So yeah, I agree.
Much cleaner.
Okay. So moving on to 7B, our meeting schedule. So I've highlighted the big differences between sort of what was sent out, put on to the meeting materials and the changes that Jason and I made earlier today. We need to make a motion to approve this. So I'll make the motion, we can get the second, or, I'll suggest a motion somebody can make, and we can get the second, and then have discussion and whether or not we need to revise it. I should note, this is all about defining the regular meeting schedule. We know that one of the reasons why we need regular meetings is so that we are able to come into a meeting and actually make adjustments to the agenda where needed. I really prefer not to do that. We should be able to have our stuff together enough that we can know what's on the agenda and say it in a clear way to the public well ahead of the meeting. But you do need that flexibility sometimes. But any of these that may, where we say, hey, we're gonna change something here and add another meeting, we can just add that meeting if we need to as a special meeting. So if we see gaps here. So one of the gaps I want to point out is the second highlighted item. So we had a July meeting on there. Dr. McKinnon and I agree. I think actually Reading made the same change where they actually are not, instead of not having an August meeting, they're not having a July meeting. And I think that it's a mistake for us to skip an August meeting, given that that's when, when the school year starts. And it just seems wrong to not have an opportunity to talk, you know, in a couple of weeks before the school year starts. So I want to highlight that, and obviously highlighting that January 22nd Saturday meeting listed here. This has been sort of vetted against the school calendars and things like that. I'll note that the April 19th meeting is comes after the spring break. So just, you know, a point to look at there. The spring break that was on the published calendar is not the correct spring break. So if you just booked a flight to Cancun for the 12th to the 16th, and that's a mistake, it should be April 11th through the 15th is the actual spring break this next year.
John, I actually forgot to talk to you about one thing.
Yes, shoot.
If you look at the time of the meeting,
Yes,
I put an asterisk next to that.
Okay.
Where you've got 7:30 as the start time.
yes.
For Reading, we talked about, is there a reason that the meeting started at 7:30 in Easton? In Reading, we changed from 7:30 to 7. But as we said that tonight, I noticed, Randy, you came in a little bit later. I don't know,
Right.
is there, are there work challenges?
If we were having this conversation pre-pandemic, I would have said 7:30 is tough, especially when I was commuting into the city.
Mhm.
And there are people in Easton who commute into the city every day. So I for one, like, I would love it. I mean, frankly, where my situation is today, let's start at 5:30, right? But I know that doesn't work for a lot of people. And I think there's been a lot of value over time to have a sort of a broad base of people who can serve on the boards. But I would leave it to discussion amongst the rest of the board.
I think it's
7
also
o'clock, fine
about-
with me.
It's also about public participation though.
Yeah.
As well, so I don't know is there any value in surveying the public
I mean, a
about?
lot of other town meetings start at 7. That's
Right.
why
Do they?
early, yeah.
Okay.
Board of Finance is 7
Right.
on Mondays.
7's fine with me, I have no
Yeah.
objections. And then the only other thing is that sometimes we're trying to sandwich meetings back to back. Whether it's a joint meeting, it's a
Right.
curriculum meeting, it's a, something happening beforehand.
Right.
So 6:30 to 7:30 is
Becomes-
more doable
Yeah.
than 6 to 7. So it
I
might
agree.
just, I don't want to say even complicate that a little bit.
So it could become a 6 to 7. Yeah, I don't feel, I mean, I like the idea of starting earlier, but I also don't want to sort of disenfranchise anybody. Randy, do you have thoughts?
No, I don't care. Either one works for me. I throw back to administration. What do they prefer?
Yeah, absolutely.
What should I
Yeah,
do?
we'll have to specify.
Well,
And I'll just say from my side, earlier is difficult with my husband, husband schedule and being able to get out the door any earlier than 7. His store doesn't close till 6, and with traffic and closing the store, it'd be very difficult for me.
It's good to
But
know.
I'm happy to, I don't know. I don't want to be the only one to hold it up. If everybody wants to join early, I don't know what the other options are.
So Jen, I'm sorry, you were saying 7 is difficult or any earlier than 7 is difficult?
Any earlier than 7:30 is difficult, with my husband not getting home till most likely 7:15 at the earliest, when he does get home at that early time.
I do imagine, that's not a unique situation, right? Anyone else who might be waiting for a spouse to get home. That could be difficult. It sounds like the sort of administration prefers a 7 o'clock start, right?
Well, I mean, we were just, we were kind of just raising the question.
Right.
I've always
Because
kind
you
of looked
really
at it
don't
as
have
a-
time to go home.
Right.
So you're just in
So,
your office from 7 in the morning until, or maybe 8 in the morning until
right.
7:25, and then you wander over here.
And then you get to hang out here for, let's
Few
say,
hours.
2 hours. Let's
Right.
say 2 hours.
Right.
There's so many things in it. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, 7 or 7:30. I don't want to, I know people are probably used to 7:30. I don't want to, make it harder for Jen, so
Right.
it's.
Think, yeah, yeah.
7 is fine with me, but I've been doing 7:30 for a decade. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna change my life.
Yeah, I think I sort of lean towards 7:30. Is that, I mean,
Well, I think earlier is better, but if it's going to exclude a board member,
Right.
then we can't do it.
Right.
You know?
and or make it more difficult in the future for people to consider serving on the board.
I don't know that it would have that impact. I think we just have to, we're looking at the 2022 meeting schedule, and we have to consider our current administration and
Right, current board member.
current board members.
Right.
You know, I mean, is there? We start at 7. The meetings have been kind of restructured.
Right.
Right? So are there things like, say, Jen is here at 7, like we started at 7, she's at 7:15. So Jen, I'm not meaning to speak for you at all. I'm just trying to sort of troubleshoot and problem solve.
Yeah,
Would it be okay to?
Is 7:15 doable? Is that the kind of?
No, I'm just saying, if the meeting started at 7.
Right.
Is there an issue with someone not being here for the first 15, you know, if she
Right.
joined us at 7:30, and it was just kind of the way we did things. With the way the meeting has been, I'm just kind of thinking about what, you know, calls order and the way things have been ordered.
Right. Consent agenda, public comment, board member comment, and you're here for administrator report.
For the
Right,
meeting.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, we got through some of those things. I think it depends on how much public comment we have. Like tonight, we got through that in 5 minutes.
Right.
I will say, I mean, there are some folks who have said in the public that it's, you know, to your point earlier about New York City commuters and more folks doing that. If, you know, if you're taking that train and leaving the city at 5:30,
Right.
you're not getting here till 7:30. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's always like earlier is great because then you potentially get home earlier, but you know, we're talking about 30 minutes once a month. It's not.
I would, you know, when I was considering joining the board, it wasn't active for me. If it was 7 o'clock, I would have said, yeah, I can't do that. My situation has changed, so now, you know, it's no problem whatsoever, but, you know, it would have been a problem with that.
Call the question.
Yeah, I think we need some motions, but we would need a motion specifically around the 7:30 if we're gonna call a question, or we can just all go around the table and say, what do we think?
Well, if we're not changing anything, do we need a motion? I mean,
We'll
it
just
says
need a
to-
motion to approve the meeting schedule.
Right.
I should also note that, in order, so January 6th, so what is the purpose of the January 6th, joint meeting?
I've never experienced that.
I think it's to present, isn't it to present
That's the law.
the central office budget or
So,
preliminary budget?
no, the
I
central
hope it'll
office
be later.
budget's happening in February, right?
Yes, yes,
Right,
that's
February
correct.
22nd is gonna be the central office budget, so I
Right.
don't know what the January 6th one is for.
I think it's training of new board members. That's what Chris Parkins said.
Oh, right, I was right, we do have Rebecca Santiago from Shipman and Goodwin presenting roles and responsibilities.
Oh, that's good, okay.
And I could even,
I see.
I could add something to that agenda around board and superintendent relations and so on.
Okay.
So, but I thought that was a long-standing meeting that you had.
It was, but that was where we presented the central office budget.
Oh, okay.
So so if the central office budget is coming on the 22nd of February now, it was unclear to me what the January 6th was. Okay, so January 6th is basically
Should we look at other, I mean, that wasn't the only thing that happened
at that meeting.
at that meeting.
Well, we've never had a January 6th. It's always been the end of January.
Right, that's correct.
Well,
The switch is with the January 22nd budget presentation.
Moving it to February.
yeah,
That's why well, and then with our sort of individual presentations. So there's a bit of shuffling versus the way
So
we
then,
normally do it.
when is, so the central office budget then would be presented on February 22nd?
February 22nd.
Well, I mean, honestly, that's kind of a nice solve, because one of the frustrations,
Right.
I think, in all the different systems.
Yeah.
Has been that the central office budget gets locked in.
Right.
And then, I don't say we don't get flexibility, but.
Right, but locked in before Region 9 is even met.
Putting it a little bit later in the conversation may actually be a good thing.
That's right.
Not that I want it to work in the opposite and end up putting pressure.
Right.
Undue pressure on the central office budget, but if we can.
Well, the pressure's coming anyway. so we
Oh,
have to-
I know, but like people have said like, oh, well, you're definitely, that increase is locked in now, and that impacts how we consider.
And
everything, so.
And what we know historically going into that conversation is not a lot. And so now we'll be in a position where we actually have a much better sense of what are our obligations or our commitments before we then talk about central office budget.
And the $1 million, the 1,000-pound elephant in the room is adding a facilities manager.
Right.
Are we debating, we're all good on the February 22nd. Are we debating the January 6th meeting?
I think
Yeah.
Okay,
so
so
I-
we make a-
Let's get.
Given- given the January,
Alright.
given the sort of what Dr. McKinnon said about the January 6th meeting, sort of board training and possibly some other items that get added there, I say it's probably good to keep it, but I would also say if for whatever reason Easton doesn't have quorum because we decide like that's not something that we need based on the agenda, I don't think anyone's going to lose their mind that we were not in attendance at that. But if the agenda resonates with us, I think we're going to show up. Yeah.
Fair enough. So I'll make a motion to accept the Easton Board of Education 2022 meeting schedule as drafted.
Any additional discussion?
I just like to object to the April meeting as it's never.
Oh.
Let's make a special note there.
Noted.
'Cause that's why there's an asterisk there. You See the
Somebody-
asterisk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to add a cake on there.
Stop, that's not what I meant.
Oh, that's gonna happen now.
Oh,
I don't want to go to.
All right. No additional discussion? Call the question. We'll start with you, Jen. Sorry. I caught you.
Yes, was that question?
Yes, or your vote on this schedule.
Yes, I support it.
Thank you. Jenny?
Yes.
Thank you, Randy.
Yes.
Thank you, Devin.
Yes.
And Jeff?
sure.
I vote yes. The motion passes unanimously. I should note that January 6th and January 11th meetings will not actually be regular meetings. They'll have to be noticed as special meetings because we're not 30 days out. Even though we're doing this year and improving the whole thing, we'll need to notice those as special meetings. But January 22nd going forward will all be regular meetings.
Is that going to cause a problem just in terms of dealing with the agenda,
Sure,
the January 11th meeting?
Just
you can't change it.
Well, that's what I
Yeah,
mean.
just as long as we have it nailed down before. And I'm trying to start asking for input on what should go on the agenda 2 weeks out, so that we, have plenty of time to sort of hear from folks. And make sure that we lock those down, what trying to do is buttoned up approach as possible. That takes us to our next agenda item 7C, which is building use and security policies. So Jeff had asked that I add an item here to sort of review some of the policies and sort of understand in a deeper way. I'll just very briefly touch on. So I reviewed all the policies I could find related in our Easton policy manual related to building use and security policies. There were 2 items in our bylaws, and then not in our policies, but in the handbook for SSES, and I'm sure there's a similar a regulation in the HKMS handbook, some items about visitors. So the 2 in the bylaws are about number 1, a requirement that we have to allow, it's this sort of state law that we have to allow for the use of rooms, halls, building, buildings, and grounds for the purposes of voting. And then the other one is that we have the authority to, but we are not obligated to provide rooms, halls, schoolhouses, school grounds, et cetera, for for the citizens of the town to use, go use the basketball court and things like that. Now, while these policies exist, I wouldn't say we have exhaustive policies on building use and real clarity around that. And I think it would be good for us to do that. Dr. McKinnon and I were talking earlier today, and it sounds like it's pretty normal to be very clear about how, if the basketball court can be used, to be very clear about in which ways, and if we plan to charge fees or anything like that. I think we're going to need some, synchronization with the sort of building administrators to make sure that we're not doing anything that sort of messes up a program that's running successfully today. Our goal here is not to upset the apple cart on any of the programs that are running. We just want to make sure that we're articulating the policies really clearly and leaving no room for ambiguity about sort of the use of our buildings, sort of people being in our buildings, and appropriate security protocols attached to that. So my recommendation coming out of this is that we refer this to the policy committee to review and suggest. And obviously, anyone on the board is welcome to join those meetings if they wanted to really dig in and talk about that stuff. And now I'll shut up and see if anybody else has anything to say.
The reason why I asked John for this, I think, is probably pretty self-evident, given the activity that took place during one of the referendums where we had a person walking through the halls. The challenge that I see with all this is we have people walking through the halls all the time when kids are not in the building. I mean, we hold Board of Education meetings, people come in. Do we know that they came right through the front door and directly in here, or did they wander around? When they go to leave, are they wandering around? We don't know. So it becomes a sticky wicket when if someone does something that the general population feels, well, that's over the top. Well, then what do you do with all the other people that you allow to wander around?
I think it's pretty
how is that
generally
handled?
accepted that people shouldn't go into classrooms in the school when school's not in session or without permission. I think we should make it very clear in our
Yes.
policy.
Well, there you go.
That's
But
There you
I
go.
think it's a bit, I think it's going into closed classrooms is all, I think should just be prohibited, and we should say that out loud, but we should make it clear in our policy as well. And people should not wander around the schools, even during a board meeting. That is not appropriate.
Right.
Like, we shouldn't either. We're not permitted to go into classrooms. That's just,
Right.
so I mean, I agree, we should absolutely put it in policy, but
Well, I guess I just think it's important because the school boards are responsible for the school buildings. It's not a town of Easton issue. It's a Board of Education issue. And for decades, we've had people wandering around in our buildings forever. And so just like we put signs up around Helen Keller saying that this is private school property between 8 o'clock and 3:30 to keep people, one particular guy who liked to go running and would run right through, right across the Keller Fields and right down the steps. And you've got classes out there after lunch, running around, and here's this guy running through that group. And so we made a policy, and we made sure that we put the signage there to back it up. It's the same kind of thing here. It's unfortunate that we're in a time and place that requires that kind of specificity. But I think it's to our collective best interest to make sure that our policy is very clear. I like Devin's idea. No one is allowed, non-school personnel are not allowed into a classroom unless directed by the building principal or the superintendent.
but I do think it's important when because we do hold referenda, we have, public meetings now in the cafeteria at
Exactly.
SCS. We had our vaccine clinic, and just being very clear that certain places are off limits.
Right.
I think some families, it's like, oh, I need to use the restroom, or I need, like, just being very clear with signage if we're going to host those kinds of events. And being very clear also with when we run elections, what I think now that has been clarified and the police are escorting people to restrooms and it's clear who's allowed in the buildings and who are not. But for the safety of our children, right, our buildings are not public buildings that are accessible to people even when the school building is closed.
Well, I'm not arguing the point. I think you're right. All I'm telling you is that for decades, people have had free access into the buildings. There's basketball that takes place at the Keller Gym. It's run by Park and Rec, and there are no gates to keep kids or parents from walking all over. And so those are the kinds of things that can become a problem if we're being very strict in one area, but then very loose in the other area. It sends a mixed message. I don't want to do that. I think it puts us in jeopardy if we do.
I think I appreciate all the comment here, and I think we would love to see participation at the policy committee for various considerations. I hope, I have a number of thoughts of my own around sort of security, and we know we have dedicated custodial staff who work very hard in buildings, and we should empower them to, if they see something, say something, and make sure that they can help to be a part of the solution, and that we do in fact sort of harden the schools and make it impossible for us to have security breaches. So, any comments, Jenny or Randy?
What does that mean? Are you gonna have security, you're suggesting, when we have the Boy Scouts meet in the Staples, or?
So for Staples in particular, I think the ability to walk the hallways is sort of always been there. And I think as a policy, Ken has made it a priority to do that now. So anytime there are people in the building, whether it's voting day or it's the Scouts or anything like that, every hallway locked, every building, every classroom door closed and locked. That's a major improvement.
That's just the building thing. I'm talking about people, I guess. Are we suggesting we'll have additional resources as far as people?
I don't think so. I think we need to consider what the best practices are and understand sort of the right level of vigilance versus the sort of any threats that could exist, and we should make sure that we're sort of meeting the appropriate level of threat with our care. But I think ultimately what we're looking at inside the schools is making sure that people are not able to access sensitive areas that they should not be in. If you're there for basketball, you're there for Scouts, you're there for the Pinewood Derby, that's in the cafetorium and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? There's no reason to be going upstairs. There's
No,
no
I
reason
know.
to-
Yeah, I think if we're like letting folks use our buildings, right, our Board of Education buildings,
Right.
there needs to be clarity with the scout leader, the basketball team coaches,
Correct.
that, if this is happening here, this is the restroom you use, you don't leave
Right.
this facility, and if they breach that trust, right,
Right.
then they probably don't get to use the facility.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's another dimension of it too, is what do you do when people are coding in violation of the policy?
No, I get it. It's just, it's painful to have this conversation for 20 minutes on common sense.
Yep.
And we do it all the time, but
I agree.
it has to be had, so.
Yeah, I agree.
So, at the policy committee level, I see us developing policy for building use, where we say something like, we realize that our school buildings are valuable community resources, and we want our community residents to enjoy them in public areas that we designate as public areas, like coming to the gym, use it as a basketball or Boy Scouts activities. But there are certain areas that are prohibited. And if you put that in language in a policy, then you can enforce it in any way you choose to enforce it. And every school is different. Some schools you can lock a hallway. Other schools, they're more open, and depending on where the gym is, where the cafeteria is, where the front office is, you can't enforce it, but you can prohibit it, and you can then, once you put that in as a policy, a custodian can then say to someone, "Excuse me, sir, madam, you're not allowed to be in the building," right? And at least I've got the policy behind them. Right.
Jenny, did you have something?
I just wanted to make sure that we're acknowledging that 99.99% of our building use and the organizations that use it are respectful and cooperative, and we have no issues with them, and we welcome their participation. And that this sounds to me like you've been working so hard to sort of bring the policies up to date with practice. I hear what Jeff is saying, when you say for decades, like I can remember being at Staples, being at Keller for a play or an event or after school and having my parents here and like, oh, let me show you my classroom, or like, oh, coming into the room and
There you
seeing something I had done posted up on the bulletin board. So there is a collective memory in the community of a much more open access to the buildings, it was just a very, very different time. So the policy is going to help us communicate that change to the community. But I think it is important to acknowledge that Jeff is correct. The building usage was very different. But we are also celebrating, it's not the right word. We also started our meeting with an acknowledgement of a tragedy.
Right.
That has a 10-year anniversary next year. So we're just trying to bring everything where it needs to be. Like Jason said, make sure it's clearly articulated.
All I want to do is bring the conversation forward. Let's put it in writing so that
Absolutely.
When the guy that likes to run through through the fields at Keller during the school day, I could look at him and say, here's the policy that says you can't do that.
Right.
And it was okay.
So do we need a motion to refer this to the policy committee? I don't believe we do.
No.
So I think we're all set on 7C. 7D. So, and please bear with us. Committees are a mess. The existing document that says who is on which committee is incorrect. I don't actually know how, several of the names got to where they are. This is my best attempt of reflecting the current state of the committees. I want to point out that the first 3 committees are Easton's only committees. All of the other committees, the other 10, are actually joint committees. So let's start with the Easton committees, because we actually, when we're talking about the joint committees, we need to consider sort of a number of other dimensions, right? So let's just start with our own. So on the curriculum committee, our current charter for the curriculum committee says that we would have 2 board members. There's no reason why we can't have 3 or 4 or 5 or all 6 of us on that committee, except that it becomes more difficult to get a quorum for that when you have more people. Jennifer Jesus has asked to be part of the curriculum committee, and I think that is a very good place for her to contribute. And I think there's nothing wrong with sort of having 3 people on that as opposed to only 2. I will note that I was one of the members. I think Jenny and I were the members of the curriculum committee when, before I was chair. I've sort of removed myself from a lot of these spots as being officially on that committee, because as chair, I'm an ex officio member of all these. So when there comes a time that I'm a regular member, again, I would like to consider membership again in some of these things. But for now, I'm just saying the communications and policy committee. When we look at the communications committee, and in another dimension that I want to think about, yes, I want to go back and talk about the charges or the charters for these committees, not today, but in a future meeting, to review the charters and essentially say, here is what the purpose of this meeting is, and articulating how many members and all of that. I'd like to do that, I hope, in our next meeting. And so then,
Can I ask?
yeah, please.
Can we talk about each committee?
Yes,
sort of
we
like
can.
Committee by committee?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've just been, things have changed so much since like I remember raising the issue of a communications committee.
Yeah.
Right, but, and at the time,
It
it
was
was
so
a-
necessary.
it was absolutely necessary
Yep.
and we needed to start a conversation.
Right.
I've just been wondering if, does it make sense to continue to have a communications committee? Is it now something that has really been, because the building leaders have taken on such a more prominent role in family newsletters and Facebook and social media and all of those other things. Plus, we've also had issues with board members on social media, so we've
Right.
really kind of pulled back
Right.
from that. I'm just,
Yeah,
it's actually maybe a committee discussion to have, level discussion to have, but
I
I'm just not,
agree.
I'm really unsure of what our role as a board
Right.
in communication and outreach is and should be.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
What if I offer to give you a communication plan
Yes.
in lieu of the communication?
I mean, that's basically why we formed the committee in the first place, is because we really desperately needed that to be happening and.
Well, there is a manpower aspect of it
Right.
too, which frankly.
Right.
Effective social media, you're on it 24/7 and it just.
Right.
I don't have the capacity or just being totally honest, I don't have the time
Right.
to devote to it at that level. So if it's a matter of just, are we keeping up a Facebook page?
Right.
And noticing things there, and they're so, I mean, I think Easton's per capita Facebook group and page number is a little disproportionate. There's so many things.
More groups than citizens almost.
Pretty
Yeah.
much, yeah. So we need to figure that out.
I think it's reasonable to have that as a part of this discussion, to say, if we as a board said, the purpose of the communication committee is no longer relevant, then we could disband that committee. I think Dr. McKinnon has ideas about how we should be thinking about committees overall, and we got a preview a couple of meetings ago about the sort of consolidation of meetings and trying to get, or committees rather, and having far fewer committees overall. So thinking about joint food services and transportation and, maybe others that go into a larger sort of operations committee. But again, all those are joint committees. And I think there's definitely work to do there until we come to the point, whether it's in the January 11th meeting or the, whatever meeting we actually talk as three boards about our joint committees. I think for now, we can't collapse those on our own will, but we can certainly do something about our own thing. So if you want to propose that, I would certainly be supportive of it as well. And then I don't know, Dr. McKinnon would recommend that we actually form a committee that we don't have, whether it be in the facility space or in the long-term planning or the financial. I mean, like, I don't know what you would necessarily.
You can make the decision tonight about, okay, because I'd like to revisit at the tri-board level, the committees. And maybe that could be at a January 6th meeting when we talk about roles and responsibilities, superintendent and board relationships, and then maybe revisit committees again.
Yeah.
And talk about how a finance and operations committee actually covers a lot of these buckets already.
Right.
And then a committee that, you need a committee that looks at facilities.
Right, Region 9 has one.
They do.
Reading probably does.
Reading does as well. We're the only ones to go.
We should.
Yeah.
As a
Yes.
separate board.
Right.
And I think some of those ER9s could be solid.
Isn't there an ER9 within?
There is not. There's a Region 9, there's a Reading, there's an Easton. The Easton and Reading committees try to meet concurrently.
I thought curriculum was a joy. I thought we were Easton Reading joy.
We just always meet at the same time.
Do they have 3 people or 4 people in there?
I think they have 2 and 4, we have 2 and 6. The 4 being members of the public, and ours is 6 members of the public. And I'm suggesting that we move to 3 and 6.
Is there ever a time when the curriculum committee doesn't or has a meeting that they don't notice?
There would be no
No.
ability.
Non-meeting?
There's never not, the committees are legal entities the same as the board. In fact, we actually don't have authority to go tell a committee to do certain things. But by the same token, the committee can't force the board to do
Sure, of
anything.
course. Yeah.
I think there's one exception, that's the curriculum committee in terms of approval of textbooks, something like that, by statute, they have authority to act. But in every other way, the board has the final word, but they are separate legal entities. With the requirement to notice their meetings and to do them in public and all of that. Sorry.
What else are we doing with this page?
So what, then, yeah, yes, let's dive in more about the sort of bigger conversation later. So I think tonight, all we're talking about is, can we look and say, we're comfortable with this for the time being, acknowledging that we're going to have sort of other conversations in the not too distant future that may affect the.
John, I had just asked about the wellness committee.
Yes, I clicked, I added you to the bonus. Oh, I'm sorry, no,
Like 3 months left.
that's very strange. I meant to add you to that, Jenny, I'm sorry. I don't know why.
It was it wasn't an expectation. It was
Okay.
just a
I actually did need to check the box for you on here.
John, if we're interested in another committee, we're just doing that.
Yes, that's fine, but then we're gonna, yes, we'll want to talk about it and make sure that it's clear to everybody who's on which committees. Are there any things on here that are just blatantly wrong, that should not be, sort of a particular box that should not be checked?
Are we dissolving number 2, or do we need a motion?
I think we need a motion, and probably we'll want to notice
Or
that.
we can
that
meet
item.
first. And
I
then
don't think we have to. I think we can, when we disband, I'll look up the. Good.
You can disband any committee.
I think.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can't disband any.
Right.
Right. For our own purposes.
I might need a little guidance on that. There is something about committees sort of being protected from being sort of arbitrarily disbanded, but I'll look. We'll make sure we go about the right
I
process.
think it's a board decision. It's not a chair decision. We need to certainly look at what we're gonna pull out.
Right. Okay. So I guess the question is, do we need corrections here? And then we would, and then I will just, if we don't need corrections here, these will be the current appointments until a future date. Okay. We don't need to vote on that. That's just, I just need to tell everybody. Okay. Good. And that takes us to board member comment. Hearing none.
I just want to
Yes,
thank Vicki for staying with us this whole time. Thank you, so kind, and just wish everybody a happy holiday. Hope you guys get some rest and reflection, and hopefully come back to evening.
Yes, please.
Definitely a need this year.
In a year.
If Kim was still here, and Devin mentioned it before, like, our kids are benefiting enormously from the extra time and the extra effort that the teachers put into advising the groups that she was talking about. I don't know who the kindness committee teacher is, but Tara Brophy runs Student Senate, and she's added all sort of extra meetings, for the kids, and it's just huge. They're putting in so much time, but the experience that the kids get participating in these things, and they started another one. There was an invitation was sent home for diversity committee, diversity club, so there's students, just at SSES, the kind of the student senators, the diversity club that's coming up. There's just a lot of really special things that the teachers are putting a lot of time and effort into on top of everything else. Just one more quick thank you to the Easton Learning Foundation. They raised over $15,000 in their annual auction. And I mean, I know a lot of the teachers, principals, everybody donates all their time to these things. I just learned how to juggle with Mr. Brown's team, but I think just that's a huge win for our community and just really great. I think it's lovely, but I know it's a ton of work for them.
charge and how they use those funds?
Yes. I was 6 years as the vice president of the Easton
So can we
Learning
talk about
Foundation. Yes, we can.
Okay.
And someone else here is related
I
to,
can put you in touch with someone.
with the current, say, president of the Easton Learning Foundation.
He's in my house.
It's a
Okay.
small town.
Okay, all right.
There's only so many families.
I don't think I've dealt with that.
So they absolutely do. They're a great organization. This is a perfect example of what they do. So they do trivia bees and they do sports tag sales, and it's basic community gathering opportunities that the community needs that also offer services or entertainment or like all of that stuff. And by the way, raises thousands of dollars to go fund kind of
Jason, we wouldn't have Project Lead the Way.
Right. Right. Or the smart boards or Chromebooks. The first Chromebooks that showed up in the district came from these.
Yoga for kindergarten.
I mean, it's all about, it's that kind of seed money to go try
Yeah,
something.
right. I understand. Okay, so it's not like ongoing
Ideally
allocation of
not.
Chromebooks. right?
Ideally
Now,
not.
that's unexpected.
No,
That's right.
You're right, I understand. It's like
We'll-
seed innovation.
That's exactly right.
we'll-
Get it started, get it
We'll
rolling.
finance it, we'll finance the first round.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Like an incubator. It's great. It's a really great foundation.
And I don't know if anyone is still listening out there in Easton land, but just specifically to the auction, Diane Ronan and Karen O'Brien were the leaders of the auction and put in hours and hours and hours and hours of time. They're still emailing winners and recipients and putting teachers and students together. So it's a massive effort, and just a specific thank you to those two board members for all their work.
Absolutely. Yeah, the shade for the outdoor classroom was in this room, 7th graders writing grant proposals, saying, hey, we need this, we need that. And they're the ones who came up with the idea for the outdoor classroom shade as part of the grant writing competition. It's really, really great group. Any additional comments?
No.
No? We will look for a motion to adjourn.
We miss you, Jen.
Thank you, Randy. Was that a second?
Second.
Devin? Absent objection, we are adjourned at 10:07 PM. Thanks, Jen.
Good night, everyone. Stay well.
Good night.